Welcome back to Untaming Masculinity, the podcast where we tackle issues relevant to men and their journeys to reclaim their masculinity. I'm Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Brad. How are we doing today, man?
I am plugging along, man. It's Labor Day weekend. Hopefully going to go spend some time with the family today. It's been hot here. It's been upper 90s, low hundreds for the last week, and it's supposed to keep that up for the next week. As much as I love summer, I'm ready for it to all be done. What about you, man? How are you?
Yeah, but you guys get that dry heat out west, right?
Yeah, about 100 degrees every day sucks, regardless.
Yeah. No, it's been good here. I actually so we're recording on a Saturday morning. I took Friday off of work and took the family to the beach, and we had a great time. Spent all day in the water with my girls, and just enjoyed some nature therapy, like I'm always talking about. It was a little different than being out in the woods, but it was awesome, man. It's amazing what a little bit of vitamin D can do for your mood.
Yeah, man. The ocean it's a good place.
Yeah, and it was fun. It was like perfect waves for what we were there for. You know, as a surfer, the waves sucked, but as just having fun with the kids in the water, it was a good time.
Yeah, nice.
So today we want to talk about something that we've probably hit on in some sense or another in past podcasts, but I want to dig into this particular topic a little bit, and it's the concept of checking in on your guys. You know, we've all got groups of men in our life, or we should have groups of men in our life, and there's a lot of times where it seems unmanly or not right to talk to your guys and say, you know, really dig into how they're doing. So I want to talk into the power of that, as well as what it really means to do that and how guys can go about doing it. So I know you had like an example that we were talking about before the show. So maybe you can start off by sharing that, and then we can get into a little bit of the details here.
Yeah, man. So let's talk about a story that I went through. I think it's been about a month. So within the Iron Councils, we've talked about, we have battle teams, and every week we have a call. And the way in which our team's call is structured, much like yours, is we really want to focus on the issues that are going on with the guys. Obviously, some other things need to be discussed in these calls and some protocols, housekeeping items, etc. But the meat on the bone, so to speak, is what really is happening in the lives of the men of the team. And we had a very unique opportunity on that call last month, in that about half the guys couldn't make it. They were preparing for bodybuilding competitions. No joke. They were working. They had issues at home. I think somebody was moving. Just a whole bunch of stuff was going on. So there were about 7 or 8 of us on this call. And I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to give every man the floor during that call within that hour to talk about what was going on in their lives, what was keeping them up at night, what were some of the pain points going on with each of the men. So every guy took, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes to just talk about the struggles they were going through. We had somebody having a mother going through cancer. We had a guy who was struggling with some depressive thoughts. We had somebody who was really struggling with custody of his children with his ex-wife. Just really heavy stuff all around. And it was a good opportunity for guys to get all that stuff off their chests. And at the end of the call, I let everybody know, or asked everybody a question. All right, guys, now we've all talked about this. How many of you guys knew what we talked about? How many of you guys were familiar with what was going on in these other guys' lives? And it was a very eye-opening experience for a lot of the men on that call that, yeah, we're brothers. We talk often, but that there were so many things going on in the lives of so many men that they were completely unaware of. And these are men that they talk to daily. And it really draws me to this notion of, 1, we as men like to hold a lot of things in. But 2, oftentimes we get so stuck on what's going on in our lives that we choose not to, or we forget, or we don't take the time to simply just reach out to our brothers to see how they're doing. Because sometimes when a guy's struggling, all that he needs is somebody to reach out to him to let him know that he's doing okay.
I've had a lot of experiences like that recently where I got guys on my team, same thing, going through issues similar to what you described. We've got cancer issues, we've got divorces, we've got all kinds of stuff going on. And reaching out and having those moments where the guys just say, hey, how you doing? And it's not just the cursory, how you doing? Because if I call up any one of my guys or you or anybody, hey, how you doing? the standard response for all of us is, I'm all right. I'm all right. And we all know that's BS. For the most part, I mean, hey, you may be having a good day, and yeah, I'm good. But when somebody says, I'm all right, that's usually a sign that there's something going on. And what I've learned to do a little bit over the last, I'd say, year is dig into that and really, okay, yeah, you're all right, but why aren't you good? What's making you not good? And just that little question, that little turn of phrase will help guys kind of unburden themselves. And it's actually kind of amazing how you can get guys to just immediately open up. It's like that is almost like a magic key to opening the floodgates and getting guys to talk. I've had situations where you say that and the guy will go on to talk for 20 minutes about what's actually going on in his life. Likewise, I've had people do it to me, yourself included. And what amazes me with the whole process, though, is how if you're the one being asked that question, all of a sudden your load gets lifted. It's like somebody's helping you with the burden. I equate it to like you're carrying a big log in the woods, and then all of a sudden you get somebody behind you, picking up half the weight. Versus when you do it to somebody else, I don't feel like I'm taking any more weight on. It's just that I'm unburdening the other person as well. As a man and as a friend, it is one of the strongest tools I've had in terms of checking in on my guys and making sure that they're solid and that they're good. Because we as men invariably hold things inside of us, and it's tough to get that out, in my experience.
Oh, absolutely, man. I'm drawn to this idea a lot. Anybody who knows me on a somewhat personal level knows that I'm really big on this concept of leaning in. It was kind of adopted from our friend Cam, who has always been about that as long as I've known him. And I've really kind of taken that upon myself to really live in that way. Because we as men, by default, here's the thing: we are conditioned to believe that it's not okay to let guys know how we're doing. Things are all right. I'm going to suck it up and get through it. And invariably, that's very unhealthy and ultimately becomes very destructive. When you get to know a guy, one of the things I've really picked up on almost instantly is once you cut past that superficial layer of crap of, I got this, I'm tough, most guys desperately want somebody to be able to talk to, somebody to be able to confide in, somebody to let them know, we got you, man. Things are going to be all right. You're going to get through it. Every man wants that. Most men think that they can't do it for whatever reason, due to conditioning, due to the fact that we are men, so we're supposed to be providers, we're supposed to be tough, we're supposed to be this, we're supposed to be that. And simply showing somebody that you care enough about them, that you genuinely can see, just like you said, somebody says, I'm all right. What's going on? Why? I don't like the sound of that. Inviting them to simply share what's going on. They crave that. Men crave it, even if they don't necessarily recognize it. And, coming back to you do a really good job of inviting guys to open up. And I hope that you understand that is not lost on me, and it's not lost on the guys that you associate with. The fact that they feel that they can have that conversation with you is really powerful, because there are too many men out there who you can see their body language, their actions, their words or lack thereof, they're struggling. And it's up to us to really try to help them and do something about it.
Mm-hmm. The word weakness was coming to mind during that entire part of the conversation. And men definitely feel that it's a weakness to open up and show any kind of vulnerability, any kind of soft spot. We are conditioned, like you were saying from the beginning, to be these strong alpha male type guys who have no weaknesses, who have no problems in life. And the moment we're allowed to open up, I think it definitely opens the floodgates. Listen, I appreciate what you just said, and I was thinking about it as you're saying it. I portray myself as the typical tough guy. I think I'm 6'2", I'm 250, I'm a big guy. I drive the truck. I got the beard and the shaved head. Like I've got a certain look to me that gives off, I think, the persona of being tough. But the fact that I can open up, and the fact that guys open up to me, it is what allows me to be as tough as I am, because I know that I've got other guys out there who are willing to pick up the slack for me, or who are willing to at least help me figure out what's going on. And there's a certain dichotomy there. In my mind, the vulnerability aspect and we can argue about that word all day long, but it's the first one that comes to mind of opening up like this is can be detrimental to that persona, but it provides such strength at the same time when you really start to use it. And what I've found personally is that the more I have guys checking in on me and the more I check in on guys, the more I'm apt to seek help myself as opposed to wait for somebody to reach out to me. So what I mean by that is if I'm having an issue at home, if I'm having an issue in my marriage, I'm having an issue at work, wherever that issue lies, I'm more apt to reach out to somebody like you, to Cam, to some of our other buddies, and say, hey, listen, man, things aren't right. Things are going a little off cue. I'm having trouble here. I don't quite know how to handle it. Can we just talk? Which is something I never would have done in the past. But because I've experienced this, both the give and the take of it, myself has grown, and I'm able to do that, and it helps me get through the situations not only faster, but I think I know it helps me get through them in a more positive manner and solve the problem in a better manner that is more constructive than maybe let's admit it, I tend to go self-destructive when it comes to that stuff. I get into a fight with my wife. My typical MO used to be burn the bridges, just go full, hellfire and brimstone. Let's bring this thing down. And I don't do that anymore, or I do it a lot less. I'll say every once in a while it can really happen. But in general, my ability to logically think through situations is increased because of the support that I've established. And that's all because guys reach out to me and I reach out to my guys.
Yeah. That's what it's all about, man. I mean, you talk a lot about that self-destruction. Men, when they're going through hard times, what's their first inclination? I'm going to hold this stuff in. Yeah. We are not wired in any way emotionally to hold that crap in. So usually what you're going to see is guys who are holding emotionally difficult or distressing things in end up participating in self-destructive behaviors. They watch porn, they binge eat, they go get wasted. Hell, unfortunately, you and I have an acquaintance who was going through something really hard and they stepped out on their wife. Like that, those sorts of things, you cannot emotionally hold this stuff in or you're going to leave a destructive trail in your wake. Mm-hmm. This whole concept of leaning in because I know that I trust my guys to make sure that I'm doing okay and that I can do the same for them is huge. I think one of the greatest things and the greatest blessing in my life, well, one of them is the fact that I know I've got a group of men around me to where if I can recognize they're going through a hard time, I can reach out to them and touch base with them. And vice versa, if I'm going through something hard, I've learned to struggle through getting it off my chest. Case in point, last Friday, I woke up in a miserably dark place. My head was not right. I felt almost depressed. I was not okay at all. Rolled out of bed and I decided, all right, I'm going to see if working out is going to fix this or help get me right. So I went to jiu-jitsu and I'm still new in jiu-jitsu and I got my butt kicked, which always happens. The guys I roll around with are awesome. They're really cool high caliber men. But I was not okay with that. I was isolated. I was quiet. I was not myself at all. I felt horrible. It was just not a good space. So I left there almost feeling worse. I was like at the mercy of just the dark clouds on the horizon mentally. I was not okay. But what I decided to do, and it was painful, it was incredibly excruciatingly painful because it felt awkward and it felt difficult, is I reached out to a few guys and said, guys, I don't know what's going on. I'm not okay. I don't necessarily need you to give me any directions or counsel or wisdom right now. I just need to let you guys know I'm not okay. And I'll tell you what, man, they all instantly reached out to me. When I told you about the same thing, you did the same. You reached out to me. Other men reached out to me. And did it immediately make me right? No. But at the same time, I knew that there was a pathway for things to be okay as long as I kept pushing forward. And the ability to simply reach out and start to get that off my chest, to begin to process it, to know that guys weren't going to judge me, hold it against me. It went from that day potentially going completely off the rails and being incredibly destructive to a incredibly productive, rewarding day. simply because I knew I had guys in my corner because they were going to make sure that I was doing all right. And to that point, several of those guys have kind of periodically checked in with me over the last week just to make sure I was doing all right. That stuff matters. That's stuff that I'm going to look back on and just be incredibly grateful for. That's stuff that I'm going to remember, and in turn, I'm going to do my damnedest to reciprocate that. So it's a powerful example of why we need to check in on our guys. You know, somebody's going to it was up to me I had to take the initiative to reach out to say, guys, I'm not okay. Not every guy is going to do that. But the fact of the matter is I've had all these guys reach out to me to make sure I'm doing all right, that things are good. That stuff matters. I could have easily gone in a very different direction, but I didn't because guys simply cared.
Yeah, and it's an important point that you just brought up. You know, when a lot of the guys that you reached out to and who reached out back are not in your physical proximity, meaning they're dispersed across the country, right? I don't see you physically on a daily basis. So I can't look at you and say, there's a problem with Brad. I can, quote unquote, hear you through text every once in a while, or you know, we've got some video comms that we use as well. But I don't, if you go dark for a couple of days, it could just be because you're busy, or it could be because you're in one of these situations. So that's when I will sometimes take the chance to check in on you. But likewise, as men, we need to step up and say, hey, things aren't right, especially to our guys who are removed from our physical proximity, because there's only a certain amount of knowledge we have of the situation if we're not with those guys every single day. And it's important that we keep up those communications well. You know, there's a lot of jockeying back and forth that goes along with our group, I'll say, of ball busting and just having a good time. And it's almost the lack of that is my first sign that one of you guys has something going on. Whether you're feeling down in the dumps like you were, whether you got something going on in the marriage, something going on, you know, stress at work, like we've got another one of our friends going on right now, stuff like that. You got to be keyed into those kind of early warning signs of there's something different going on here, and Joe is not acting in his normal manner. Let me just ping him on that.
And that requires intentionality on our part. Like it's not rocket science to see that somebody that you know, a friend, a brother, something's different in their demeanor.
Yep.
They didn't respond the way that they normally do. They didn't respond as quickly as they normally did. Somebody that you generally hear from somewhat regularly ghosts you. When things like that happen, there's almost always a reason. The reason might not necessarily be a bad one. They might just be busy at work. They might be on a vacation. They forgot to tell you, you know, whatever that might be. But the fact of the matter is, if something changes, we are not being the brothers that we can be if we simply don't just check. Say,
and
hey, man.
how valued do you feel when that situation is going on with you? You know, you're on that vacation that you forgot to tell somebody about, or you're busy at work, but everything's fine. And somebody checks in, hey, dude, are you okay? Like, haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yeah, I'm busy. But like that little sense of, hey, man, there's somebody out there that's keeping tabs on me, that's concerned about me, that's worried about me. That isn't my mom or my dad or my wife or my kids. You know, one of my brothers is keeping an eye on me and is looking out for me. There's power in that.
Yeah. And I will tell you something. There are a lot of men out there who don't have anybody checking in on them regularly. There are men who don't have a mom or a dad who's checking in to see how they're doing. There are men who have issues in their lives and they simply just would love to, as corny as it sounds, they'd love to hear from one of their guys. Like, it's one of those things where it sounds almost cheesy. Whatever. I don't freaking care. When one of you guys reaches out to me to see how I'm doing, it kind of puts a smile on my face. I love it. It's like, dude, I love seeing this. I love it. It cheers me up.
Yep.
It means a lot.
Yeah. Last week we were talking with Father Michael, and he mentioned, you know, there's certain things that we don't need to be talking to our women about. I forget exactly how he phrased it. His implication wasn't that we should be keeping it from our wives so much as they're better to be discussed with other men. And I think that's also the important point here, is that a lot of the stuff we're talking about, you know, checking in on your guys, being, you know, intentional about paying attention to their actions and their normalcies and their abnormalities. That's important. That's those conversations with your guys that is going to not only drive your relationship, but improve you as a man, because now you're not only out for number one, but you're also building that pack. We've talked about the power of the pack in the past and how it's just important. This is how you do it. You build these bonds of trust, these bonds of concern and your guys will resonate with each other. Your guys will get pulled in and sucked in as you lean in and as they lean in, and you become this tight pack. We've got it. We've got a group of 7 or 8 guys who nobody lives near anyone, yet we can trust each other with anything. And we know that A, it's not going to go outside the group, and B, we can help each other however possible. It's a strong bond, and it's all because we lean in and we let each other know that we're there and we're present and we look out for each other.
Absolutely. I kind of want to dive into that concept about what Father Michael talked about and what you alluded to. These conversations that we have to have with men. I think a lot about that. And there are certain struggles that I have that I'm going through, in my life. Not bad things, but how to be a better father, how to be more present, how to be more capable as a man. A lot of that comes through strength, through physical training. There are a lot of different things like that I simply just can't talk about with my wife. And part of the reason is because she's a woman, and so she's inherently different, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I can't go to a woman and ask her for advice or for some guidance on how to be a better father. She's not a father. Of course, she can give her insight and her opinion, but at the same time, these are conversations. These are things that we're very vulnerable about. Like, the things that keep me up at night more than anything is, am I showing up for my wife? Am I showing up for my kids? Am I providing for them? Am I taking care of my physical health so that I can be there for them capably for the rest of my life? These are the things that I think about constantly. These are things I can't necessarily talk about with my wife. I mean, I can, but I'm not going to get the depth of the response and the engagement and the reciprocity from her that I'm going to get from talking with one of my guys, period.
So I'm reminded of a little story that I heard this past week. It kind of hits on that whole point of men need to be talking to men and understanding men. It's a little bit skewed from that, but it's going to hit home. My nephew, who's like 9 or 10, was at a birthday party the other day, and he got into a little scuffle with one of the boys. And my nephew's he's a nice kid, but he's a little he's not like a rough and tumble kid. So he immediately gets into this little scuffle, and he's like, he's telling the mom at the party, you need to call those kids' parents. They need to get in trouble, blah, 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 blah. And the woman, to her credit, didn't necessarily do that, but she did call my sister-in-law and said, hey, listen, just want to let you know what happened. The boys were this is what happened. The boys got into a little bit of a scuffle. This is how your son reacted. And my sister-in-law didn't know how to react. Well, her husband steps in and goes to my nephew and goes, listen, he goes, this is boys. Like, this is what's going to happen. I don't want to see you being the physical person, but somebody pushes you, push him back, and then walk away. You don't need to throw hands or anything like that, but just, stand up for yourself. And basically gave him the advice of, you got to toughen up a little bit. You can't just be crying to mommy all the time. And my sister-in-law is all concerned, and she calls my wife and she goes, well, what does Dan think? And I'm like, he was 100% right. Like, listen, he's a boy. He needs to be able to stand up for himself in some regards at some point in his life. He can't just keep going to people who are in authority and telling them to get the other person in trouble. Your husband was 100% right. He shouldn't be throwing hands or be the instigator, but it's okay to stand up for yourself. And what I'm getting at here is, when you go to your wife, she's going to think like a woman. And that's great. We need that in our society. And as a man, sometimes we need validation that our thought process is correct. We're not going to get that with our women because they've got a different train of thought on how things are done and how things go. Whereas if you go to a man, you're going to get that masculine mindset of, yeah, it's okay to stand up for yourself. Yeah, it's okay to stand on principle and be strong and masculine and self-assured. Likewise, it's okay to be vulnerable within the group and rely on your guys. Whereas you're not going to get that from a female influence. This can go into a much bigger conversation about how single mother homes is a problem with the masculine movement and all that good stuff, but we can stay away from that for right now. Having a man in your life and having a father figure in your life will help guys develop into that tougher guy. And having men in your life as a grown man will help you develop the traits and skills to be a better man.
Oh man, you nailed it. The entire time you were talking, I was thinking a lot about the premise of the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. And really the the crux of the entire argument of this, the nice guy, if you will, is that he's not okay. Like, guys, boys have been conditioned to think that they are not okay just as they are. This concept, this idea of you not being okay is something that pervades through a lot of guys. A lot of guys sit here thinking, I'm not okay just as I am. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough father. I'm not a good enough husband. I'm not a good enough man. There's a reason that suicide rates in men are considerably higher than they are in women. There's a reason that a lot of men struggle with mental illness, probably even more so than women. I don't have a study in front of me, but I feel like I read something recently that more men struggle with mental illness than women. It's because we've conditioned ourselves to feel that it's not okay to be us. That something inherently, some of these immutable characteristics we were born with are not okay. And this idea of, I'm not okay, and I'm a tough guy, and I'm a man, so I can't talk about this, it pervades the minds of a lot of guys. I mean, even within our group, we've gotten really good at recognizing when stuff is going on. But dude, I kid you not, how often is it that one of the guys in our group is going through something hard, and you can tell that they're going through something hard, and it takes them some time to talk about it. It might be a few days, it might be a week, and then eventually they'll just kind of blurt it out. They're sitting there for a week wanting to get this off their chest, but for some reason they think that they can't, or something is preventing them from wanting to do it. It's really honestly sad to think that we as men have this battle constantly, that all this stuff is sitting inside. And that's why it's so paramount that if you see one of your buddies, one of your friends, one of your brothers who's struggling, something seems even a little off, something doesn't smell right or pass the sniff test, you got to talk to them, because they very well could be going through something and all they needed was that nudge to help them get that off their chest. Because too many men keep telling themselves, I'm not okay. We got to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about studies. I just looked it up quickly while you were talking. I'm looking at a study from the American Psychological Association here. And the headline is, when it comes to mental illness, the sexes are different. Women are more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety or depression, while men tend towards substance abuse or antisocial disorders. What does that tell you? It tells you that men are self-medicating because they won't talk to people, whereas women are willing to talk to people and deal with their issues. Right? And that's the crux of our whole conversation here, is find somebody to talk to and make sure you're talking to your guys. That will keep us away from the substance abuse, the antisocial disorders. That's why women who have issues tend to be diagnosed more than men, because they talk. We're not saying to be feminine, to be, women. We're saying to not keep things bottled up and make sure that you're keeping track of your pack. Keep your guys tight, check in on them, make sure they're doing good. If they're not doing good, understand why they're not doing good. Listen, none of us, well, I mean, we may have some psychologists listening to the show, but none of us are psychologists. But we can be there and be a support group for our dudes when they're going through hard times. And if being that support guy is, hey, listen, this is past the point where I think I can help you, but I want to help you find somebody who can help you. That's where we jump in and we help too.
Yeah, man. And we as men who are seeing our brothers in need, don't be a selfish asshole. Don't say you're busy. Make some time in your life to simply send. Do you know how long it takes to send a message to somebody? Be like, hey, man, been thinking about you. Doing all right? Something seems off. Whatever that takes, it's worth it. You're making an investment in that relationship that I guarantee you will bear fruit down the road.
Yep.
Because how often has it been where I look back over the last 2.5 years of my life where I've really focused on, building a band of brothers within the Iron Council and in life in general, where I've simply gone out of my way to just say, hey, buddy, you doing all right? And they'll come back a couple weeks later and offer the same. Mm-hmm. I mean, case in point, even outside of the Iron Council, there's a guy in jiu-jitsu who, really good dude. I found out he'd lost his job. So I just sent him a message, be like, hey, man, you doing okay? Like, what sort of line of work are you in? He told me what he's doing. It's kind of in line with what my brother does. So I said, hey, I'll put out some feelers, see if he knows of anything. Let me know how it goes. And it meant so much to him that he actually reached out to me the other day independently and said, hey, man, I know you're still new at jiu-jitsu. There's some things I'd love to show you. Let's get some things going. Here's some ideas. Let's talk about it after class on Tuesday. Simply because I took a second to reach out. Mm-hmm. It's an investment, guys. Like, is it quid pro quo knowing I'm just simply going to do this because I'm going to get something in return? No. But it means enough to somebody else that they're going to be in your corner when that time comes. And that's what's so powerful about our group, Dan, is that happens constantly.
Constantly. So let's give the guys a little bit of direction or tactics here. Let's talk about the guy who this is kind of a novel concept to him. He's kind of new to it. Maybe he's starting to create a little band of brothers. How can he go about starting this without it seeming to be completely out of left field?
It starts with having individual conversations. Like that, to me, one of the most important things you can do as a guy is if you've got a little band, you got a little group, you should be talking with all these guys individually. Just for me, the way that looks is I'll shoot them a message, be like, hey man, how you doing? How's life? What you got going on? And just have like just a side conversation to see where they're at, see where things are going on, like see where things are going with their life. Because for one, that shows investment in them. It's like, hey, I want to get to know you on an individual level. And two, it essentially sets the terms of engagement, if you will. You get to get a little bit of a pulse of where they're going. So as simple as it sounds, just reach out, start to really build a conversation and a relationship with somebody.
Yeah, and the key there is that it's more than just, hey, did you see the game last night? Or, hey, what do you think about the fights this weekend? Yeah. It's dig a little deeper, ask about the family, the life, their marriage, whatever it is. I would start a little bit smaller in terms of not digging into like, hey, are you and the wife are fighting? Like, are you okay? Like, okay, maybe just how's work going? How, what's going on there? Stresses, that kind of stuff, and slowly it will meander into the right direction.
Something that I do, and I know that you do really well, is when somebody's talking about something, picking up on little clues. Mm-hmm. Something that they mention about their kids. Okay, ask about their kids. They talk about this hobby that they're into. They talked about how they just smoked a pork shoulder the other day. She's like, dude, how'd your pork shoulder turn out? Picking up on those little clues is a really easy way to ease yourself into a conversation that doesn't seem awkward or forced or unnecessarily heavy. And all that simply requires is listening. That's it. Just listen.
Yep. Yeah, I'm reading right now. It's an Ed Milet book. It's The Power of One More, I think is the title of the book. And he talks about circles of relationships. And you've got your inner circle is your most diehard people. It's the people who are for lack of a better term, your ride or dies. And then as you go out, your relationship with these people decreases to the point where you've got very, very faint acquaintances at your outermost circles. You want to make sure that your guys are within those first couple circles and that you're having the conversations that are beneficial to that level of relationship, right? Getting started on these can be tough. As guys, we don't necessarily like to talk about our feelings or talk about how, what's going on in life other than the high level fluffy stuff. But the more you're able to kind of chip away and get into those inner thoughts, those inner feelings, those inner concerns, the more that these conversations are going to get easier, which kind of goes back to our discussion on hard conversations. But you can dig in, and I think even you and I have found that over the years we've known each other, we've been able to get deeper because we're able to have conversations and build trust. We're able to actually get deeper into those conversations.
Yeah, it's a whole lot easier to lead off a conversation with, hey, seems like something's going on in your life. What's up?
Yeah.
Than it was in the past.
Right.
Whereas if you're initially building a conversation with somebody, it's okay to find that common ground. It's okay to ask about the game last night. And then that kind of can lower somebody's guard a little bit. And then you can kind of introduce how are things at home or whatever that looks like as that conversation matures.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not an easy thing to do necessarily off the top. But once you kind of establish that you're there for that kind of conversation, most guys will open up.
And another thing, probably the next tactical thing that you're going to want to do is after you've established that, check in periodically. Shouldn't have a conversation like that once and then don't talk to them again for 6 months. Be like, oh, hey, dude, I forgot about you. It doesn't take a lot of intentionality and a lot of effort to simply reach out, every few weeks. If you want to be incredibly structured about it, you can set up a calendar reminder or a to-do-list item about like, hey, follow up with somebody today to remind yourself. Because, we are busy as men. We have hobbies and kids' hobbies and work and marriage and mortgage payments and just everything that every man deals with. There's a lot on our plates. But as we were saying earlier, it takes 10 seconds to shoot a message to somebody to see how they're doing. So whatever you can do to check in periodically is huge.
I agree. The follow-up is key. That's what really shows that it wasn't just like a one-off type situation, one-off conversation where you guys let your guard down, but that the person, that you really care about guy as a person, and that what he's going through is something that you're concerned about. So absolutely follow up.
And then I think one other thing, aside from following up, that's going to be really important is this idea of reciprocity, right? Like, yeah, you're reaching out to somebody, but at the same time, you've got to allow them that same opportunity to help you out. So if that simply means, them reaching out to you, engage them in the same way. If you're going through a struggle, that may mean, hey man, going through a hard time right now. I know you're going through that before. Any ideas? Something like that. Give them the opportunity to afford you that same thing. And that's going to strengthen and foster that brotherhood that much more.
Yeah. And you don't have to have all the answers too when you have these conversations, right? I think back 2 years ago, I had a really, really good friend who was going through a tough divorce, and I was just there for him to vent to and to listen. And, if he asked for advice, I could give him advice, but I was so far removed from any experience in that situation that I didn't necessarily have any advice to lend other than, how he could maintain being a good dad, how he could maintain being a good guy in light of everything that was going on. But just to be that ear to listen to, a lot of guys just need to hear themselves talk and hear themselves kind of work through the situation verbally. Yeah. So it's a strong thing to be there just for them.
And that is one thing going back to that point, it's so easy for us as men to always offer advice. Oh, you should do this. Oh, you should do that. How have you thought about this? Oh, have you thought about that? Somebody's going through something difficult. They oftentimes usually don't want all that advice. Maybe there's some advice that makes some sense, but they don't want you throwing this idea and that idea at them. I was going through a work leadership training program, and they had us watch a TED Talk about something called the advice monster, where essentially the gist of it is when we're constantly offering advice, we're not allowing that person to be able to identify a solution. When somebody's going through something, sometimes they just need to vent and work their way through what they've got going on, and they usually already know what to do. Sometimes advice or a little bit of guidance can go a long way, but if we're constantly offering them advice, we're actually hindering them more than helping them. So it's really important, just like you said, that I think you're talking about the same friend who reached out to me about their divorce issues, and I don't know that life. I have nothing to offer in terms of advice, but I'll listen, and I'll be a voice of reason when needed. And sometimes that's all that they need to get directionally focused and back on track.
Yeah, and we may not have all the answers, but we can also see situations where they may just be going completely off the rails and lining themselves up for a really bad decision out of anger, self-pity, whatever it is. So you can definitely help in those situations. All right, man. I think we've given the guys a lot of good tips here. It's a good conversation. I make sure that I reach out to you guys, and I love the fact that you guys reach out to me, and it's definitely brought our group to a different level. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate these calls with you. It's always a good time getting together.
Yeah, buddy. Let's go.
For all the guys who are listening, we appreciate you as well. We thank you. Head on over to untamingmasculinity.com to get the show notes. We'll have links to a couple of the things we talked about here, including the study about mental illness, and we'll do our best to find that TED Talk that Brad mentioned as well. You can also find show notes for all the other episodes that we do. We just had a great conversation with Father Michael Butler last week that I highly recommend you guys take a listen to. And you'll find links to our social media as well. We're the most active on Instagram. It's just the platform that works best for Brad and I. So check us out there. Share your stories, share your thoughts about your tribes and what's been working for you and what hasn't. And the last thing we ask is that you leave a rating and review for us on your podcast player. Let us know what's working, what's not. Help us get the word out to the masses. So until next week, we appreciate you, and we'll leave you with just one question. What are you doing to untame your masculinity?